I would say minimum 4 to 5 years ago, not recently. But we never used them so extensively. We never used them, in this manner. We only thought the way of attending a class is to be in the class. The way of getting work done is to be in the office. If you're not in office, work's not getting done. The only way to shop is to go to the mall. But that's changed. And I think that, if you can remember one thing out of the 7 trends, it's this, saying that before any transformation happens, the thinking has to change. You have to think it's possible. It's possible that we will live in Mars in the next 20 years. It is possible that this work from home and education from anywhere will continue, beyond this pandemic as well. And the moment you start thinking of that as possible, and this is like a rude awakening of what is possible, is when you start thinking of more realistically on the remaining trends that I'm going to come to. So that, I think, is one of the biggest messages that all of us have learned. And what's happened in the corporate world is that suddenly digital has moved from, and that's the first trend, that digital has moved from becoming a good to have. So if an organization was forward looking, it set up a digital team and set up set up a position like mine, which is a chief digital officer, and you start looking at driving digital initiatives. But that was only for a forward-looking company. Today, it has become a necessity. The minimum necessity is how do you work from home, right? That's where it all starts off. You start off from how are you tracking your employees, whether they're safe or not. Even when factories open back, how are you making sure that social distance is maintained and you don't have the regulators coming after you and saying that, you've had more cases of corona either with you or your suppliers, and you have to shut down production and have a loss in revenue. So it's become a necessity. I mean, it's such a necessity that I got a call from a paper mill, I won't name the paper mill, saying that they want to hire a chief digital officer. And that was unimaginable, I think, even with me always thinking of the future, to think about this about a year ago. So a small paper mill in the northern part of India is thinking of how it should adopt digital technology and drive its business further. And it's no longer constrained with only some revenue, some putting up a website and doing that. And that's changed fundamentally. And what's also changed is the budgets for the same have really expanded. So just as we went into in Reliance, what happens is that, we started off first with basically making sure employees are safe. So we launched an app very quickly where everybody every day reported that where were they present. So for example, I moved from Bombay to Delhi, so I was in Delhi. My dependents, where are they? And, do they have any symptoms of corona or not? So is that, there or not? So that was the first part that we got checked. As part of the team in the supply chain, we started making sure that the factories were running and those didn't stop. So basically it means coordinating with all of your suppliers, making sure that we were essential service, but the suppliers were not. So helping them sort of take that up. And, in our usual contracts with these suppliers, we have, you are supposed to supply till our gates, which is a simple Incoterm that we have. But at this point of time, what we had to do is basically give that up and saying, no, don't bother. We've got an app which all we need is the driver's phone number. And as long as you put the driver's phone number in the app, then we can track all the goods coming in. So we needed that to make sure our factories were running. And as we moved into that and made sure the factories were running, prices were crashing, commodity prices were crashing. And our CFO came back to us and said, we need a cost reduction because it's not just it's the output prices of fuel and, chemicals crashing, but also the input prices are crashing. So we have to take advantage of that. So suddenly, from ensuring that, factories are running and supplies are achieved there and employees are safe, we switched into using high analytics to look at prediction of commodity prices and then started doing that. The point I'm trying to make is that in each element of what we're trying to do, a problem we're trying to solve, there is a digital element of it coming in. And today we're getting the budgets and the support. I could get, the budget to subscribe to commodity prices, and then I could get resources to do analytics upon them and forecast and saying, where are they going to go from here? What do we see the supply and demand changing in the coming months? And how do we collate all that together? So that's the first big trend, right? In terms of every company is now allocating money, resources to drive this digital transformation and not be lost out. It's not being forward, it's not being lost out. Before we come to the second and third trends, second, third, fourth trend, I'm assuming all of you have, or at least most of you follow Marvel and Iron Man there. He's my favorite hero. And if you look at Iron Man, you just imagine what's happening. Tony Stark is sitting in his sort of lab. He's designing this new Iron Man suit. And he puts together some, so he puts together some projection saying that this is what I want the suit to have. So I wanted certain strength, certain flexibility. And then, Jarvis, which is his digital, assistant, basically runs simulations on that and says that, whatever you want will work. Or you need to tinker these specs because I see a problem between the power ratio and the performance and different things, right? Those are not working together. So we need to change some of those things. And then that robot is actually built and it's sent on a test flight. It's sent on a mission. And as it's flying in its test flight, you're able to see the data of that particular robot. And I think all of you can visualize, right? The Iron Man movie, this is actually happening in that as he's building those robots. He's seeing how it is performing. He's not in the suit is elsewhere, kilometers away, and this is performing. And he asks that suit to perform a maneuver. And let's say that maneuver fails or it has a problem, and the whole diagnostic is done by Jarvis again and reported saying that these are the problems of that part. Now, this sounds futuristic. It's a science fiction movie. But guess what? The conversation with each of our manufacturing leaders has been exactly this, saying this is how they want to run their plants. And the three particular next trends that I'm going to call out to as to what people want and what are we implementing in Reliance as well. So the first one is called as digital twin, saying that whatever is running physically, the parameters or the physical operation is also seen digitally, right? So for example, if you look at your computer and you open up, Task Manager over there, you see all of the components of your laptop running, and it'll say, so much of memory is being used, so much of capacity, CPU capacity is being used, so much available. Everything will be visible there. So that's a task manager which shows you the actual working. This is what people want for a plant. Sorry, I think some people need to be on mute. So that's what people are expecting in a plant, saying that there is a plant. I need a complete digital twin of it on my laptop, on my control room, so I can see that happening completely. And this is not a new concept. I mean, every aircraft that flies, which has, let's say, GE engines, the digital twin of the GE engine is seen by GE, people who are servicing those machines, so they can see the actual performance of that and starting to use that data and information to predict failure or predict safety. Now, the technology is at that level where, aircraft safety is absolutely important and there's no chance of failure. If your engines stall, then it'll take a miracle to save lives of the passengers. So you go to that level of safety. But as technology costs come down, everybody wants this for their plants as well. And this has been done as well. If you look at Bushan Steel in China, they're operating a steel furnace, which, blast furnaces in their steel plant. And the control room is more than about 300 kilometers away. So those people are not at the site. You don't have people saying, I need to listen to the machine, I need to see the machine to make out whether it's working well, not working well. But there's great data connectivity, there's great analytics, there's great digital sensors to make sure that 300 kilometers away, they can control the plant and figure out and run the plant. Now you guys are finance folks, right? So think about it, how you are able to separate out and combine the shop floor with the office floor. So today, when we talk about learning through computer, we say, yes, that's possible. When we talk about running a plant through a computer, we say, no, no, that's not possible. Somebody needs to be at the plant. But that concept is going to change. That trend is going to, sort of, and it'll start with just the visualization of data, saying what is happening, and then possibly go on to control and troubleshooting, prediction, and different parts of that. So that's the second trend called digital twins. I don't see any hands raised for questions, but please feel free to raise your hand again if you have any question or comment on what I've just said. Easier to just take those now. If you feel easier again type those out. I'm comfortable with that. I'll move to the third point, but I can come back to this again if you'd like it. Third is basically on autonomous robots. So what's happening today in Amazon? Let's talk about that. And I'll come to what's happening in manufacturing after that. So Amazon is an e-commerce player. It has a completely automated warehouse. And what that means is basically that there's a robot which basically moves, it's programmed, and you say, you want, let's say, a toothbrush, a soap, some washing material, a packet of atta, and that is your packet that needs to be packed. And this robot gets that feed from your order that you feed into Amazon. That robot will go to each rack, pull the rack out and bring it forward. There's a company called Orange Gray in India, which is also doing that. Check them out. So that rack itself is shifted to the picker, and the picker picks out whatever is happening. So you don't have to have people to go to each rack in a warehouse and pull things out. The rack comes to them. And what happens is these racks are mobile, so they're rearranged very quickly. So if, let's say, Republic Day just went by, and around those 6 days, 10 days, if there's a demand for flags, then suddenly that flag section or the flag part of the merchandise comes forward. So the least amount of time is taken in picking those flags. And till, let's say 15th August, it goes back to the end because you don't need it. And so the warehouse is being sort of designed. The setup of the warehouse is dynamic. It's almost every day, every week, every month. And most of it is becoming mechanized. And this has been happening in Amazon, in Flipkart, in a lot of the e-commerce players for the last 3-4 years. In the shop floor, people have been afraid of that, saying that there's a live machine, that there's a furnace. If a robot does something wrong, a mobile robot, fixed robots have been in manufacturing plants again for a long time. But if a mobile robot does something wrong, it would endanger the safety of the plant, of humans. But that is another trend that's going to change. We're going to see a lot of what we call as cobots, collaborative robots, where there's a human and a robot working in conjunction. So for example, in Reliance, we have a catalyst change. So every time you have a shutdown, you have to take out, you have to wait for the reactor to cool, then the catalyst or the inspection is done inside, and then it is set right. It's estimated what needs to be fixed inside the reactor, the catalyst needs to be changed, and then that's done. So approximately about 2 days are just lost in basically shutting down the plant and cooling the plant before one can operate upon it, because humans can't operate in those conditions. It's not safe for humans. But tomorrow, what could happen is you gain that whole 2 days, and guys, think of 2 days of revenue being, achieved just because you can use robots there. Because every shutdown is a loss of turnover. And if you can reduce a shutdown of, let's say, 15 days to 13 days, that's, two days of extra turnover, and that's huge for any process plant, and Reliance is a process plant. So that robot can go there, can work in those conditions which are not safe for humans. We're collaborating with some students in IIT Madras and designing these and looking at that to do that. But that's one trend that's going to come about a lot, where we will see that robots which are successfully working in, let's say, warehouse conditions where the activities are fewer, safety is higher, they will gradually move on to the shop floor. And the shop floor can work, with the robots. One very interesting financial thing that happens is, humans tire, they're bound by labor laws. They can work only 8-9 hours, and that's not the problem with robots. And that explains, the cost structure of these e-commerce companies as well. Saying if you have an autonomous car or if you have a cobot, they work 24 hours. Is the only time to charge is, battery time. So what you're doing is you're converting a lot of your variable costs, which are quite large. Like for an Uber, the driver's cost is 33% of the cost of a car a kilometer is the driver's cost. And if that's automated, that cost just suddenly goes away. That's what's going to happen to manufacturing companies as well, where we're used to having humans available at fairly cheap labor rates. And we throw humans at every problem and saying having more people to do a job is great. But tomorrow, we start converting some of these variable costs into fixed one-time costs. And as technology improves, that these fixed one-time costs will be really affordable compared to, variable cost is. And that's a trend that's going to play out as well. So that's my third trend of autonomous and collaborative robots. Again, I don't see any questions. I'll move ahead. But guys, feel free to ask. I can even try to relate some of them into your finance part, MBA in finance. So some part of that is still remembering, not so much of accounting, but at least the finance parts I remember. So happy to know, if you have any questions there. The fourth is going into a touchless service model. Very recently, about 4 months ago, my mother has a heart ailment and she needs to go for a checkup very regularly. But I was very afraid, am I giving her a checkup or a potential source of infection if I take her to the hospital? So that's the risk reward that is being debated, saying that, you don't do a checkup, so you don't know how the vital parameters are. You don't know whether you need to change the diet or change the medication. And if you go to a doctor, then you may just, catch COVID because there's so many corona cases when you step into hospitals, especially. And then I saw this app from Reliance, which is telemedicine, where you can book an appointment with a doctor. The doctor will see you, you can see the doctor. The only difference is that, we are not on the same location, but everything else is the same. The test can't be performed at home as yet, but the conversation and consultation is absolutely possible. And this is what we call as a touchless service, where the service provider is not in the factory. So he's not in the premises, but he is remotely present to do that. We're starting to use that for inspection of everything. So inspection is a huge, so reliability is a very high requirement in process plants, especially in terms of hydrocarbon, because the risk of low reliability leading to an accident, leading to huge damage is very high. So inspection is a very core activity that gets done at every point of time, every time you're either doing routine maintenance or you're doing, like a shutdown and repairing something. So we've been able to, and it's such complex instruments, like I don't think any of us know how to repair our cars anymore. We could repair or fix or understand some part of the older cars like Fiats and all of that, because some parts are mechanical, but now everything is really electronic. So it's only experts who can really understand and diagnose, and those experts could not travel to the plants, and we need to keep them running. So we've evolved methods of how inspection, support, fixing can all be done remotely, and that's starting to take up. And we're going to see more of this part, which is, and in our personal lives, it's telemedicine, but also a lot of the other parts where we will see touchless service coming into play. In some ways, the restaurant delivery is also like a touchless service. That's a delivery of a product. But consultations, fixing of things is what we're going to get into. So that really changes the way. So one, it changes the cost structure. That expert doesn't need to waste a day coming in from, let's say, Korea or the US to India, travel and fix that issue. So potentially his time on the job is reduced by 20%. And that it reduces both his rate to us and also the dependency and our ability to go to the best expert, because a person can take up maybe 3 jobs simultaneously because it's all virtual. Like we're into 3 meetings, one after the other in a day. And that one meeting could be with somebody in Delhi, another one in Bombay, in Bangalore. So this will really increase the productivity of expertise. So if you have an expertise tomorrow, you can potentially earn much more than what a fixed salary can help you earn, otherwise. So that's going to be the 4th trend that I spoke about. I saw a hand being raised. I think.
Hello, Amit sir. So Dhanashree Landge this side. So I work as a research analyst in a consulting firm. So I have seen that when it's a digital transformation journey of any company, there are few pillars which are important for a company, such as business continuity is one of them. Then the cost of adopting new technology can be another one. So can you mention few of these major pillars which are important for any company while going for the digital transformation?
Yes, Dhanashree. I don't want to talk about any company because the kind of industries are very wide, but I'll cover manufacturing, and that can help you, sort of use this as a principle and go ahead to other parts as well. So if you look at if you look at a simple reason why companies exist is to deliver shareholder value, right? Whatever engineers believe and digital people believe, that is the sole reason for a company to exist. And if you look at shareholder value, that's created by enhancing your revenue, that's growth, enhancing your profitability. And if you look at a company like Reliance, that it's hinged upon one, running your plants. So if you look at the cost factor in terms of profit, the plants have to run 100% of the time, right? So it's 2 parts. One is running continuously, and second, in terms of output from those, is higher and as much as possible. So one is the processing part. So if you're processing with the same assets, let's say, $1 million of crude, you can process, let's say, $1.2 million of crude going ahead. So it's the asset, working. And second, the asset uptime, the machinery has to be up. So those are the main 2 parts. Everything else hinges around that. So you have to have supply of resources, you have to have supply of material to make sure that happens, but those are the 2 essential parts. And if you look at the revenue side of it, it's one, your supply chain working efficiently, and second, your product market mix being perfect. So what also happened in the pandemic for us is, transportation fuels are about 30-40% of our product portfolio, and suddenly people stopped. People were locked in, so that dropped drastically to less than about 10-15%. So what you have to do is to change your product mix so that you can deliver what is required in the market. So we quickly shifted to export markets and delivered what they were absorbing, essentially a lot of products for PPEs and other plastics that were there. So once you've figured out the business parts, you start looking at the levers that digital can help you drive that. So for example, in terms of asset utilization, we have a lot of optimization programs that run, and the optimization programs have just increased the level. So what I was talking about, the digital twin, we were optimizing one asset today. Tomorrow you can start optimizing that same asset across 5 plants. And tomorrow you can start optimizing the 5 plants fully. So that extent of optimization increases from a small base to a larger base. And that starts with your digital twin, where you're seeing all the assets being present and the data for the assets coming, and then you're able to win the performance. Second, and I'll come to a 7th factor, which I have in my trend, is to make sure that you can predict downtime of, your machines. So instead of having unplanned downtime or downtime which you have lesser time to fix, you can predict it and say that I'm going to have a shutdown in that machine likely after 7 days. How am I going to route the product through go to a bypass method for the product, and there's a second line. How can I change the loading so that that machine is free for next 7 days after 6 days, so I can fix that issue proactively. So you're balancing your lines in the process plant and also making sure that issue is fixed. And I can go on and on in terms of digital technologies, but that's not the point. The important point I'm trying to make to answer your question is that always put the business problem in front. The business problem of petrochemicals plant or Reliance aren't changing. Those remain the same. And then we start seeing which technology can suit that. And as you pick the technology, you have to look at two factors. One is the technology mature enough? So can you just go and deploy it and achieve that result? So today, Microsoft Teams technology is mature enough. Probably millions of people are using it and working from home. Zoom is mature enough to do that. So you can just go and deploy it. And are there technologies that are really impactful for you, but not mature? So how do you start experimenting and playing with them so that by the time you're mature, you're first to market or first to use it and first to do that? That's sort of the pillars on which we construct our digital strategy. And then it is really going by technology, by startup. What's the price at which it's available? What is the impact to us in terms of deploying it? Does that answer your question, Dhanashree?
Yes, sir. It answered my question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Tushita, you have a question too?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for explaining quite well about the four different trends. I wanted to ask you a question about the fourth trend, which was touchless service model. Is this only applicable for healthcare industries?
In fact, it's applicable. I've given you an example where personally I've experienced a touchless service, but in Reliance, we've used it for inspection of machines. So let's say there's a Siemens engineer who supplies us equipment. That engineer is sitting in Germany. We have to repair that equipment to go ahead. So he's delivering an engineering inspection service. We have used it for dry docking of our tugs, where we're trying to roll out some process where we always invited the OEM to make sure those were present to do that. We've done that as well. So any service that was today being delivered in person, one can add a technology layer to it and try to deliver it remotely.
Okay.
So your imagination is your limit. So for example, education is being driven touchlessly today.
Okay. Okay. Can you just give me one good example of how cosmetic industry would be, would be affected with this digitization of maybe touchless service or the digital twin that you were talking about, or robots or cobots for that matter?
Saying the cosmetic industry.
Yes.
Okay, very interesting. So I have a friend in HLL and I was asking him, how are you guys doing in Corona? He said, suddenly we have a new classification of all of our products. That products is called as in-house cosmetics and out-house cosmetics. So these are cosmetics that you use when you step outside home, and the cosmetics which you use when you're still at home. And they had to restructure their supply chain, restructure all their sourcing based upon this, because the in-house was really shooting up and the out-house is going down. So this was completely changing. Second, if you look at, so that's in terms of just the product market changing and the analytics needed to change your supply chain through that, to do that. If you look at any cosmetics industry, essentially they're process plants, right? Because you have to take some chemical, you have to add some chemicals to it, you have to treat it in some way to get the desired product, and that product has to go through some quality checks. So it has the same problems as Reliance has. The machine has to be working, the machine has to be giving an output. So all the examples I gave you of, let's say, a digital twin working for that cosmetic industry will be applicable here. The example of a robot trying to do that work in a plant, which a human used to do, will also be applicable here. So the headset you have to wear is not just a domain for the manufacturing part, but it's the kind of manufacturing, whether it's discrete or process plant. And the examples I give you can largely hold good over there as well. Touchless service, I don't know, do cosmetics have a certain certification by some authority in terms of it being safe? And if that was not possible during Corona by the visit of an inspector into the site to do it, did they try to do it remotely? I don't know. I don't have an example there, but it'd be very interesting to know that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions. Let me go to the fifth part.
I have a question actually.
Yes, please.
What is the human error rate actually after you install or have automation in a company? What would be the human error rate?
Can you elaborate on this? What do you mean by human rate after automation? Is the machine doing the job or the human doing the job?
Human doing the job. Cobots. Or cobots doing the job.
I mean, there is no one answer for this. I mean, you will only deploy it if the error rate comes down or the error rate is the same as humans doing the job.
Sir, may I rephrase the question?
Yes, please.
When a process is normally undertaken by a human being, there's a certain error rate which is expected and accepted by the industry in manufacturing. Now, you have replaced, let's say, whatever the human being was doing by a robot. And subsequently, you also mentioned use of a robot and a human being together. So now when such changes take place, what are the acceptable rates of error?
Just want to say, end of the day, that decision is financial. I'll take the example I gave of Amazon, where you have a robot which is going and getting the rack which has atta and the rack which has toothpaste, because these are the two things you've ordered, versus a human going to these two racks and picking up one item each of those. The human's error rate could be X, right? Because what is a human rate in this case? Human rate of error is someone picking the wrong item or walking in a roundabout fashion and not the shortest path to pick up the items, right? Both are error rates. Now, in this case, it's programmed, so the chance of making a mistake are very low unless something goes wrong in the programming or there's a shutdown of that machine. And as you deploy it, you will make sure that that rate is at a very low rate. But that is this specific instance. But let's say, and I see someone who's talked about insurance sector. Insurance sector is processing policies. If you're using a bot to process policies, which means read what's been written in an application and enter them into the system, let's say that part of it is being automated instead of a human doing it. People write in different handwritings. The machine may actually have a higher human rate, error rate than a human.
Right.
So what you do is you combine the two. So let's say there are 50 words written, 40 were perfect and simple, like a date and my PAN card number, my age, all of those were very simple. But so those were picked up, 40 were picked up automatically by the machine with a very low rate. But I mentioned 3 diseases I had when I filled the application in my stupid handwriting, and those have to be read by a human. So that's why you're combining a human and the machine to give an overall better productivity and rate. But as I said, it's very contextual for that particular case, and you will only see deployment where both are better. The error rate is lower and the productivity is higher.
Thank you, sir.
So one more question. A lot of research is involved when you are trying to automate, right?
I can't make out who's asking the question.
Hello. So I'm Shamla here.
Hi, Shamla. Right.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that there's a lot of research involved when you're trying to automate, right? And then you prepare your shop floor and you actually plan your activities. And sudden change in technology, how is it going to react to it? Are you going to continue with your systems, what you planned, or what? Then it's not going to be cost effective. Like it will be, again, you will have to incur more cost, isn't it? How would you deal with such kind of a situation then?
No, that's actually my next point here when you talk about the cloud part of it. I'll give you, I'll try to illustrate with an example, right? So let's say you have a washing machine today and it has, 10 features and you bought it 5 years ago. And you're looking at an ad which says, they've done all the R&D, that washing machine has now half the power consumption. It has, 4 more spin cycles. It's really moved to the next level. And the question you ask in finance, like you do, is it worth replacing the asset? I need to sell my current washing machine at junk value and spend, let's say, 40,000 more to get a new machine. And at homes, this decision is made every 4 or 5 years, but in like our plants, it's made 15 years. So every innovation is in the market, but it's not in your asset. But the beauty of the cloud is, if you think about Uber, for instance, what is an Uber car? It doesn't matter what car it is. The car could be a car bought last year. A car could be a car bought 10 years ago. As long as you can fit a phone with it, you can put a GPS device there, and you can connect power supply, it suddenly becomes a smart car where the car is visible, it has GPS, it has connectivity with the driver, all of that. So that's what cloud is doing, saying that, can you pick up an existing asset and can you add these components to it with either sensors or algorithms on top of it and convert that into a smarter asset? So in car driving, there are 2 technologies happening at this moment, saying that how can you convert a normal car into an autonomous car, which is going to be completely revolutionary, because my car and your car can become autonomous. And the second is, how can I build an autonomous car from scratch, which will always also be an electric car. So these 2 coexist. If that second one comes fast enough, the productivity obviously is fantastic, people will switch to that. Otherwise, the decision made by good finance folks will be not the right time to switch, because the switching cost is too high. But the big change in manufacturing plants, the very big change in manufacturing plants has been exactly this. How can I make an asset, which was, let's say, 10 years old, have some of the capabilities of the new technology today by adding these sensors in this? That's been what we call as the open loop and the cloud computing, where that data is taken out from the machine, the algorithms are taken out from the machine and put on the cloud, and the results are given back into the machine, because the physical part remains the same. Like in the washing machine, probably some components are changed, but it's usually the control panel which changed, the logic of running it has changed, some part of heating the water has changed, not so much the physical parts. The physical part, evolution, R&D is much slower. The growth change is much slower.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just expanding on this cloud a bit, which is the 5th part, is in finance terms, I'm variabilizing an asset, right? So what I did to that Uber car is basically put on GPS to it, put on that phone to it, and suddenly that I have a variable cost of, so GPS costs money for an Uber, unlike for us, it's free. So Google Maps is free, but Uber has to pay for it. So what you're doing is you're converting, and tomorrow there'll be a program which you feed the program into it, and you'll convert it into a autonomous car. So this shift of cloud is basically to variabilize both assets, which is usually IT assets. So instead of storing this file somewhere which you're recording at the moment on a laptop, you could also store it on the cloud. You could share it that way. So there's no physical asset being used to store that information. But similarly, you're also buying the service of the cloud. So this, you don't need any Zoom software installed anywhere. You're just paying for it and saying, this is a plan I'm subscribing to. So a lot of these costs of collaboration, the cost of any part will start variabilizing with the cloud. So today, if you look at IT assets, what's happened is about 60–70% of the companies have already variabilized their IT assets. So their servers have become on the cloud, whether it's a private cloud or public cloud. And now the progress is on to other IT softwares. So an SAP service, for example, if you've heard of Salesforce is a fantastic example of a cloud service. So today you have a Salesforce program where one can go and put in all the appointments, like we have to meet our dealers, our distributors. You can put all of those into running our sales. You can fix the meeting there. That meeting app can be, integrated with Ola. So When you have the meeting, the Ola is booked automatically, the Ola arrives, the payment of that Ola can happen with a corporate account. So think of all the productivity that's being achieved over here because everything is on the cloud. So the cloud allows machines with, let's say, a fixed software to go beyond their software limitations and work with new softwares, new algorithms. It allows enterprises to work across each other as well and not be limited by so within enterprise, we're quite efficient. We have a lot of IT systems, but between enterprises, we don't. And the cloud is allowing seamless working between enterprises as well. So that's also happening. So that's like a big trend. It's very prevalent in e-commerce that you see. You know, your payment gateway is different. Your delivery is by some delivery company. Your warehouse is with a third company. Your seller is different, and Amazon is just pulling it all together. But you're going to see a lot of that coming in manufacturing as well, where we have cloud adoption, not just for the IT part, which is largely being done, but also for what we call as the PaaS and the SaaS, so software as a service and platform as a service arriving there. And that's being driven largely by these cloud computing companies, which is AWS and Azure. These are going to be the big, so these are like the Androids and iOS systems of personal. So companies will start running on these versus SAP and Oracle, which used to be the powerhouses earlier. So that's a big change we're going to see in the future as well. The fifth part, and you guys are going to love this, is the digital supply chain. And this is, this is the sixth part of the fifth. The digital supply chain, everybody wants to digitize it for the last 10 years, saying that Reliance is an SAP system. We create an order in SAP. We give it to Siemens. Siemens also has an SAP system where we send them an order by paper or by email. They pick up the order, they feed it into their system, and they create a production plan. They create that equipment. That equipment, the invoice comes to us on paper. Or so, you know, between companies, we've had two companies, even with the same system, SAP, we're just not able to collaborate. And if two big companies like Reliance and Siemens can't collaborate, then imagine how do you collaborate with the logistics provider? How do you collaborate with the ship? How do you collaborate with the CHA? How do you collaborate with anybody along that whole chain, which leads from giving an order to getting a supply, the whole supply chain part of it, whether that works for suppliers or customers. But what's happened in the last 3 years is governments introduced, and there have been 2-3 problems of this. One has been technology has not been perfect, but that's not been the biggest problem. The biggest problem has been standardization, saying that Siemens wants to receive its order in a certain way or feeds its orders in a certain way. Reliance makes the orders in a different way. Siemens makes it invoice in a different way. Reliance wants the invoice in a different way, right? So the mismatch in formats of what are essential fields, what are necessary fields, some part of it was always decided by the tax authorities, but a lot of it was not. But what's happening now is in the last 3 years, if you look at GST, if you look at e-way bill, we also have the unified logistics platform coming up, which will sort of create a layer like UPI has done for logistics, like UPI has done for payments for logistics. You have FASTag, which also records which tolls your truck has been into. And the best part of all of them is that the government is deciding the format. And I only see them improving and creating more. So technology is prevalent. We also have a lot of futuristic technologies like blockchain, which are also coming into play. And the standards are being set, both for imports and for domestic travel, both by the government, and the government's playing a fabulous role here. So this is now the time for digital supply chain, where the logistics costs alone are about, I think, 13-14% across the country. And we want to bring them down to, let's say, 9-10%. And this will be a big driver of that. So in the future, I'm seeing digital supply chains, which is a dream for all of us, becoming a reality. And once these become digital, everything which is digital creates a lot of data, and that data, you can create a lot of efficiency from that. So that will have a big booster to both the bottom line and top line of companies, which are producing great products or services. So that's another one. The last one is, we can stop if there's any questions here. but I'll go to the last one and then I can take any more questions. Last one is about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I'm sure you've heard a lot of these terms. I'll try to give you an English explanation of them. Machine learning is like, you teach a machine to cross the road in the US. So you go to the US, traffic lights, traffic rules are strictly followed. People drive only on one side of the road. So to cross the road is very simple. You have to walk to the place which has a zebra crossing. If you cross anywhere else, you have fines there for jaywalking. So you have to walk to the place where you have a zebra crossing. You have to press a button which makes it green. And when you see it green, you can walk across and nobody will hit you because it will stop in time to make that happen. So there are rules and there are systems, and you let a robot follow around people for about a month. It will figure out, you don't need to teach it all of this, saying find the zebra crossing, blah, blah, blah. It will figure out this is the pattern that humans follow to cross the roads. And that's machine learning, right? That's what they'll do. So we use a program to learn how things are done so that they can be done in an automated fashion in the future. Machine learning, rule-based part. But there are also artificial intelligence, which is like crossing road in India, where there is no traffic rule. You can cross at any point of time you like. You don't need to look only towards the left before you cross. You need to look at the right as well before you cross, because the vehicle could be coming from any part. And sometimes there's a negotiation as well, where you're seeing a truck speeding up, but you start walking. If you look into the driver's eyes, the guy will stop and pause and let you cross. So that requires a lot more sensors. It requires a lot more unstructured data. It requires a lot more calculation, and that's AI basically. That's the simplest explanation of ML and AI. What happened in Corona, this has been around for the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. And companies have started to use them, but use them only where they had lots of data. So for example, in e-commerce, every click of yours, every time you put something into the basket, is a click of data. So a lot of the data is recorded, and that's being used with these algorithms to drive benefits. Very surprisingly, we have actually more data in our plants. So in a process plant like Reliance, we have pressure sensors everywhere, we have temperature sensors everywhere, we have flow meters everywhere. And that data is recorded in terms of, and we know what's in that pipe, right? What chemical is there or what combination is there. So everything is known, and there's tons and tons of data, more than what is there in e-commerce companies. But we've never pulled them out of those boxes. Like you have, let's say, data in a washing machine, but it's never come out. So you don't know how to use it in a better format. So with cloud, now the data is now coming out from those systems into an open system, into a cloud system. And now a lot of people are running AI and ML to drive those machines in a different way, to experiment those machines in a different way, and to predict failures in the machines. So all of that is happening. What we're going to see, I think, this year is more courage in implementing that. We've always had great scientists, great statisticians, great solutions. But somehow we've lacked, I think, a little bit of willpower to drive things in the plant, because if it's working, why break it? But we're going to see more of that as the challenge increases of, third wave coming, second wave coming, demand spiking and going to highs, demand going lows. As this volatility increases in the systems, we'll need more and more agile response, and technology and statistics is one way to drive that agile response. We'll see a lot. So that's really the 7 trends that I want to share. I promised I can, I'll just type out, I don't know the link. I just type out my handle on LinkedIn. It's Amit Varma 09. And if you can just log into LinkedIn, look at my last blog post, you'll see all of this written down, so no need to take notes. And a bit more is also mentioned there. So that's it. Happy to take questions, if there are any at the moment.
So if you have questions, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Pradeep.
Hi, this is Manoranjan.
Okay, Manoranjan, go ahead.
Yeah, we know that everybody loves this digitization. So not we also discuss the flip side of it. Flip sides. Like what happens basically, the not being too negative about this digitization. What happens to the human capital? Don't you think that they will be made redundant over a period in time? Majority of them, if not all.
Yes, so there is in 1970s when computers were introduced in banks, the question was what will happen to all those people in banks. Computerization was a big technology step ahead. So what really happened to banks, right? One, banks grew. We have more banking than ever before. We have more complex products now coming up. We were an uninsured country. A lot of banks have gone into insurance to give us those part. I think more or less people who could adapt to that change and to computers have been able to continue with their jobs and have more meaningful work than they had before. People who could not adapt obviously must have lost their jobs, and there will be some productivity in terms of a single organization, but I would tend to believe there are more people in the financial sector than before. That's why growth is happening. So that is one factor. Every transformation is a disruption, no questions about it. That disruption, people have to adapt. Some people have the luxury, like you and me, we have an education, can adapt easily, or have a mindset to adapt. So I've just done a course, a mini master course after working for 20 years to just stay abreast of the technology which is there. I would advise you that you're still in education, but don't take this education to serve you through your lifetime. 5 years later, do something new. Another 5 years later, do something new to stay updated. Some don't, and society will have to evolve methods of supporting them as well, because that's what we need to do as a society. There's also a lot of dark side in terms of ethics. That basically is quite fascinating as well. So you have an Uber car going, which is automated, and there's a collision that's going to happen. There's a pregnant woman on the road ahead, and there's a driver who's, let's say, a black man. I'm just quoting some words here, not that they mean a lot to us over here. So the decision has to be made. Either that car, the algorithm of that car can go and hit that woman but not injure her too much, or it can brake hard and the man sitting in that vehicle will have, let's say, a rib fracture, right? It will be a very hard stop for that person. Someone in that program has to write saying, what is the decision matrix over here? So a lot of ethical bias, a lot of ethics come into place as well. And if you watch a lot of futuristic movies, they're all about this. There's only about ethics that the future is simple. Star Trek is simple, Iron Man is simple. The ethics of it is more complicated. So as a society, we'll start facing a lot of those issues as well. I have absolutely no answers there. But that is the dark side of that.
Yeah, I agree to that. People need to adapt, but I have seen in my part, because I belong to industry. I was part of Reliance some point in time. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that particularly if I can tell about this commerce people who are just will be coming out, what happens to their jobs? Because I have seen in my life of 29 years of industry experience, the role of the finance guys, accountants particularly, have reduced, and it's everything the system does. Like you said, SAP has been doing a lot of jobs which average mind was doing earlier. Now with this artificial intelligence coming in, so I believe that it will further go reduced. So it's a now chance of only brilliant minds, not average minds. So they will be only sticking, and others will be just made kind of redundant. I feel so. I mean, that's okay. I'm not being negative about the digitization. That's very otherwise would not have been doing this particular session as what we are doing today. But this is the risk part. Like when we talk of the digitization happened when the smartphone was launched, we are very happy. We are going a lot of gaga about this. That okay, I've got a very nice way of communication. But at the end of the day, what I'm seeing that okay, the whole family is on that smartphone, doing a lot of wastage of time. Okay, there are a lot of uses. I'm not denying that, but this is the flip side of that. Okay. The next part.
Absolutely right. I just make a point here, Manoranjan. I think the biggest takeaway from this discussion is basically saying that this will impact your life. Because every time we talk about Kodak shutting down, Nokia went bust, they didn't figure out the photography industry, they didn't figure out the smartphone industry. You keep thinking this happens to other people, not to me. I can promise you, digital is so pervasive that it will impact you. It doesn't matter whether you start with thinking negatively or positively, and that's your own outlook. As long as you're taking away saying that whatever I have learned for the 15 years was going to be valid for me and it's going to get me a great job, a great career, I would say no. It's going to get you a great job probably based on placements. But a great career will depend upon how you stay updated and start keep updated with the technologies, sort of pace of technology that's happening, so that you stay relevant. And Manoranjan has clearly, I think you said it very well, Manoranjan, saying either you'll be a brilliant mind making a system, or you will be someone who's following a system, right? Like a person who's a delivery boy of Amazon just comes and delivers. Is a very, very task-oriented job of doing that. Pradeep, you had a question?
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you very much. It's very insightful session. And I do acknowledge that staying relevant and continuous transformation of yourself is very important in today's dynamic environment to be stable and growing in career point of view. So yeah, that is very much true. Sir, I'll now put forward my question, which is very specific to the technological aspect that we have discussed so far, including machine learning and AI and all those stuff. So this question is specific to what I'm doing currently. Sir, I would like to understand in international environment where industries are still struggling to get that advantage.
Pradeep, I can't hear you now, so there's a break in your voice and I can't hear you completely now at the moment.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure where I lost.
So I heard you in terms of the international scenario where...
Right. So in international environment where small and medium businesses are still struggling to get that advantage of doing business across the border, and the major issue here is the trust. Today, if at all a small medium organization think of any such opportunity, they have to go through a lot of agents and vendors and so on. So I want to understand, like, will this chunk of our portfolio of technology enable these businesses to get more candid in doing business across the borders?
So it's again, Pradeep, it's not a simple yes and no answer. I think the tools of experimentation have become cheaper. So if you're a very small company of 10 people and you want the state-of-art software for sales management, it is available at a price that's affordable by your company. You don't need to go to an SAP and need to have a certain turnover to afford that. So the tools available are now available at a cheaper price. What's also happened is, I don't know if you heard about open source. Open source is making, like Zoom, till 40 minutes is open source, right? It's available to anybody free. So there's so much of productivity being unleashed by these digital tools, whether that's creating a sales presence, whether that's looking at costing, whether it's looking at optimization, that it's now available. Who makes use of them will always remain, like $1 million question, because you need certain competence to do that. And that's something that, I think time will tell. You can't, it depends on individual to individual. But I'm seeing more and more, I'm just trying to send you the link as we speak, I don't think it's going. So I'm just seeing more and more companies become sort of like you can see a unicorn status, right? So there are more companies which are becoming unicorn, um, uh, which were not there in the future. So this technology boom is leading to a lot of new companies coming up, and when new companies are coming, it's always a good sign, right? It will lead to creating a little bit of level playing field for them. Having said that, you'll always have domination by some. So at some point of time, the Rockefellers were dominating a certain industry and the big leaders, and now you think that Amazon and Google are dominating everything, right? But I think that time keeps passing and you have a new player dominating industry at different points of time.
Yeah, makes sense, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Any other question? I can't see any hands raised.
Yes, sir. Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Myself, Pradeep. Sir, I have one doubt that as per you says that the all things are going to be automation, electrification, or robotization. So my one thing is that what are the security threats are there? Because recently we seen some kind of so-called cyber attack by the China on our electrification system. So relating to this, what kind of cloud data system there is a thefting from that, or dark, or any kind of cyber attacks are there? So what kind of security measures take by the securities in this kind of new era? Because threats are not come directly or any kind of direct threats are there, but some of that come the do the any kind of remote area also. As we say that if we are able to make the control the business by 300 kilometers away, so it is also quite to theft our data from 1,000 kilometers away also. So there is any kind of security threats or the steps taken by the companies?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll talk about Reliance so you can get a context of that. So we have a biggest refinery near Jamnagar, which is close to the Pakistan border. And at some point of time, the threat we understood was from either these Pakistani militant groups or like a war. So we have missiles in Jamnagar, so it's an Air Force base with missiles. And we also have, I think, a protected status so that in case a militant attack happens, there's the right force which can be deployed very quickly to protect it. But recently we saw with the Saudi example where I think from Yemen, there were like drones which came and disrupted the pipeline supply over there, which really changes the way you see risk. So I think the lesson from Corona we've learned is that the risk we need to reassess at a very different level. So no one thought that there'll be a risk of no production for 1 month or no going to office for 3 months, right? These are not risks we factored. So similarly, in terms of security, there are new risks that are coming up. So there are drones now which can do physical attacks, and there's malware which can do sort of data attacks, right? And every company has to be very vigilant of those. And Reliance again is taking care of those. So the good part of a capitalist economy is every time there's a threat, there is a company giving you a solution. So there are companies like, for example, for drones giving you a solution. How do you track drones which are very low flight and seen by different parts? And we're looking at those solutions. In terms of, there are firewalls which we use for data. And we try to put a lot of the data where we don't want an external input into a private cloud versus a public cloud. So we have data centers of our own. Reliance that way is privileged. Because we have Geo, we have data centers of our own where we keep our own data. So that's the steps that we are taking for security. It is undoubtedly a big threat because wherever there's economic value of disruption, somebody will exploit it and somebody will give you a tool to defend it, and that will go on. But you're very right. I think the threat is someone, everybody drives electric cars, and electric cars, there is 70% is software, and then somebody puts a virus and all the cars are down to it. So is that level of disruption that you can cause versus just a laptop for office work?
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Maybe a last question. I think we've spent a lot of time on this, and I know a lot of things are buzzing in your head. I've finally managed to put the link of that article of mine. You can read it at your leisure. If you have any questions, put them down there as well. I'm happy to keep answering them.
So
Okay, no more questions then.
Yeah, sure, sir, sure. I think Jones.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Honors, please. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. With this, we conclude our CommSearch. I would like to thank you, sir, for giving us such a wonderful knowledge in your valuable time. I would like to thank all the participants for being good and punctual, and technical and non-technical staff. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. With this, we conclude our CommSearch 2021.
But thank you, everybody. You've been a great audience, great questions, and hopefully you take some of these learnings away and be the stars of the future in the digital world. Finance is how the whole world runs. Someone has to pay for it to do it. So great expectations from all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Varma, this is Dr.
Yes, sir.
Patil. उनका टाइम हो गया है बहुत ज्यादा.
Yeah. Coursework participants, you will get a WhatsApp message with detailed instructions for tomorrow's presentation. And students to note that you will have your regular lectures from tomorrow. Okay. So see you, and we'll end the meeting. Thank you all. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam.